The Khalifa International Tennis and Squash Complex in Doha sits gleaming under the relentless Middle Eastern sun, a monument to sporting ambition built with the kind of money that makes most national sports budgets look like pocket change. The pristine hard courts shimmer in the heat, the VIP lounges drip with luxury, and the stadium seating stretches upward in tiers designed to hold thousands of tennis fans hungry for world-class competition. This is where the global elite of women's tennis gather each year for the Qatar Open, a prestigious WTA 1000 event that has hosted legends like Serena Williams, Maria Sharapova, Justine Henin, and in recent years the dominant forces of the modern game. But something happened at the 2026 edition of this tournament that sent shockwaves through the tennis establishment. Something so unprecedented, so utterly unexpected, that it forced everyone from tournament directors to Grand Slam champions to fundamentally reconsider what star power actually means in the modern era of professional sports. A 20-year-old player ranked outside the top 100, competing in a first-round match that under normal circumstances would be relegated to an outer court with maybe a few hundred spectators scattered in the stands, sold out the entire main stadium. Not partially filled it, not drew a respectable crowd, completely, totally, absolutely sold out every single seat. While this was happening, Grand Slam champions and top 10 ranked players competed in the same time slots to stadiums that were maybe 30 to 40% full, their matches unfolding in front of scattered pockets of polite applause and vast expanses of empty blue seats baking in the desert heat. The contrast was so stark, so visually undeniable that it couldn't be ignored or explained away. Something fundamental had shifted in the tennis ecosystem, and that something had a name. Alexandria Eala. Welcome to the story of how a young Filipina tennis player created an atmosphere that made the sport's biggest stars feel irrelevant. How she exposed the gap between accomplishment and connection, and how she proved that in the battle between rankings and cultural relevance, culture wins every single time. This is the story of the day tennis learned that championships don't automatically equal star power, and that the future of the sport might look very different from its past. The facts of what happened in Doha are so extraordinary they bear repeating because the tennis world is still trying to process them. Alex Eala, ranked somewhere in the 150s on the WTA computer, was scheduled to play Teresa Valentova from the Czech Republic in a first-round qualifying match. Under normal tournament protocols, this match would have been assigned to Court 3 or Court 5, played in front of maybe 200 people. Most of them coaches, family members, and hardcore tennis nerds who show up for every single match regardless of who's playing. Instead, tournament organizers made a decision that had veteran tennis journalists checking their credentials to make sure they hadn't accidentally wandered into a parallel universe. They designated the Eala versus Valentova match as the featured attraction on the main stadium court during a prime afternoon session. They put her match ahead of contests featuring multiple Grand Slam champions. They essentially looked at their entire draw, filled with players who had won majors and reached #1 in the world rankings, and declared that a 20-year-old from the Philippines with 0 WTA titles was their biggest star. And they were absolutely, unquestionably, perfectly correct. The moment the schedule was released and Filipino fans in Qatar saw that Eala would be playing on the main court, something remarkable happened. Tickets for that session, which had been selling slowly all week, vanished. Gone. Sold out. Within minutes, every single seat was claimed. The tournament website crashed from the traffic. Secondary market prices skyrocketed as scalpers, recognizing an opportunity, started selling tickets at multiples of face value. For a first-round tennis match. Let that sink in. Scalpers appeared at a women's tennis tournament to profit from demand to see a player ranked outside the top 100. By the time match day arrived, the scene outside the Khalifa complex looked less like a tennis tournament and more like a major international football match. Thousands of Filipino fans, many wearing matching shirts in the crimson, blue, white, and yellow of the Philippine flag, converged on the venue hours before the first ball was struck. They carried banners, they organized chant sections, they transformed what should have been a quiet Tuesday afternoon into something resembling a World Cup atmosphere. Security personnel who had worked the Qatar Open for years and thought they'd seen everything found themselves overwhelmed by crowds that were too thick to manage safely. The normal protocols for player arrivals had to be abandoned because the masses of fans waiting outside the player entrance created chaos. Tournament officials scrambled to add barriers and extra staff, frantically adapting to a situation they'd never encountered at a tennis event. Inside the stadium, the transformation was complete. Every seat filled. Filipino flags draped over railings held high in the stands, waved enthusiastically during every changeover. The usual quiet, polite tennis atmosphere replaced entirely by something that felt more appropriate for a Davis Cup tie or a major team sporting event. The noise levels before the match even began were extraordinary, a constant buzz of excitement and anticipation that made it clear this wasn't going to be just another first-round contest. For context on just how abnormal this situation was, consider the typical early-round dynamics at a WTA 1000 tournament. These are prestigious events, second only to Grand Slams in importance, featuring deep fields of world-class talent. But the reality is that early rounds don't draw major crowds. Casual fans wait for the quarterfinals and semifinals when the elite players face each other in higher-stakes matches. The first few days of the tournament are for hardcore enthusiasts, scouts, and people who simply love watching professional tennis regardless of the names on the court. That's not a criticism of the sport, it's just tournament economics. You build your event around the stars, put them in evening sessions when ticket prices are highest and television viewership peaks, and accept that the early rounds will be played in front of modest crowds. The early matches help fund the prize money and allow lower-ranked players opportunities to compete, but they're not what drives ticket sales or broadcast revenue. Eala shattered that model completely. She proved that the old assumptions about what draws crowds might be outdated, that there are entirely different metrics for measuring star power that the tennis establishment has been ignoring. She demonstrated that a player's ability to connect with a passionate demographic might be more valuable from a business perspective than their Grand Slam count or world ranking. The tournament organizers deserve credit for recognizing this reality. They looked at their data, saw the massive Filipino expatriate community in Qatar, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, understood that Eala represented something bigger than her current ranking, and made the calculated decision to feature her prominently. That decision paid off spectacularly with unprecedented ticket sales, incredible atmosphere, and global media coverage that put the Qatar Open on front pages it would never normally reach. But here's where the story becomes psychologically fascinating and perhaps uncomfortable for some of the sport's biggest names. While Eala was selling out the main stadium and creating an electric atmosphere that had even neutral observers talking about the incredible energy, other sessions featuring far more accomplished players were struggling to fill seats. Aryna Sabalenka, a multiple Grand Slam champion and former world number one of the most powerful and dominant players in women's tennis, played her early round matches to stadiums that were maybe 30 to 40% full. Iga Swiatek, who has spent extended periods at number one in the rankings and won multiple French Open titles, competed in front of plenty of empty seats. Coco Gauff, the young American sensation who won the U.S. Open and is considered one of the sport's most marketable stars, couldn't generate the kind of crowd that Eala drew effortlessly. These are players who, by every traditional measure of tennis success, should be the main attractions at any tournament they enter. And yet they found themselves as afterthoughts, background players in a storyline that had been completely hijacked by a 20-year-old from the Philippines. If you're Aryna Sabalenka, sitting in your hotel room after your match, scrolling through social media and seeing the videos of the Eala crowd, the noise levels, the passion, the complete transformation of the stadium into a Filipino fortress, how do you process that? You've won Grand Slams. You've been ranked number one in the world. You've defeated the best players of your generation in the biggest moments. You should be the star of this tournament. The marketing material should feature your face. The primetime sessions should be built around your matches. Instead, the entire tournament has been overshadowed by a player who's never won a WTA title, who has accomplished a fraction of what you've achieved, who by ranking and results should be a complete non-factor in the broader narrative of this event. The envy has to be real. The frustration has to be genuine. Because what's being revealed is an uncomfortable truth that established stars don't want to confront. Accomplishment and star power are not the same thing, And in the battle between the two, star power wins because star power sells tickets. This isn't to diminish what Sabalenka or Swiatek or any of the top players have achieved. Their tennis accomplishments are undeniable and impressive. They're better players than Eala right now, with superior results and proven championship pedigree. But in Qatar at this specific tournament, at this specific moment in time, they couldn't generate what Eala generated. They couldn't create the atmosphere, couldn't drive the ticket sales, couldn't transform the venue into an event that transcended tennis and became about something bigger. What exactly is that bigger thing? It's representation. It's cultural pride. It's the hunger of a community that has been underrepresented in global sports to finally have a champion they can rally behind. The Filipino expatriate community in Qatar, like Filipino communities scattered across the globe, has been waiting for this moment. They had Manny Pacquiao in boxing, a once-in-a-generation superstar who united the entire nation every time he fought. Now they have Alex Eala in tennis, and they're bringing that same passionate energy to her matches. When the match schedule was announced and Filipino fans in Qatar saw that their champion would be playing on the main court, the mobilization was organic and instantaneous. Social media groups exploded with activity. Community WhatsApp chats coordinated ticket purchases. Fan clubs activated their networks. This wasn't the result of clever marketing campaigns or expensive promotional efforts by the WTA. This was grassroots, community-driven passion, people desperate to support one of their own on an international stage. The demographic reality is straightforward but often overlooked by tennis authorities who remain focused on traditional European and American markets. Filipinos represent one of the largest diaspora populations in the world, with millions living and working in countries across the Middle East, Asia, North America, and Europe. These communities maintain strong cultural connections to the Philippines and actively seek opportunities to celebrate Filipino excellence in any field, but especially in sports where representation has historically been limited. For years, these communities existed on the margins of tennis fandom, appreciating the sport, but lacking a player to fully invest in emotionally. Alex Eala changed that equation. She gave them their champion, their representative, their reason to buy tickets and show up in force. And when they show up, they don't do it halfway. They transform venues, create atmospheres, and demonstrate levels of passion that make traditional tennis crowds look sedated by comparison. The match itself became secondary to the atmosphere, though Eala's performance deserves recognition because managing that kind of pressure is extraordinarily difficult. Walking onto court expecting polite applause and instead being hit with a wall of noise from 7,000 people chanting your name on every point is both an enormous advantage and crushing pressure. The natural tendency for young players in that situation is to overhit, to try to crush every ball to generate even louder roars from the crowd, to become a hero on every single point. But tennis at the professional level rewards patience, consistency, and tactical discipline, not hero shots and unnecessary risks. Teresa Valentova, her Czech opponent, came into the match as the favorite based on ranking and head-to-head history. She had beaten Eala in their previous encounter and possessed the kind of powerful, aggressive game that could hurt anyone on a fast, hard court. She served big, hit heavy ground strokes and had the experience to handle pressure situations. For Eala, this match represented multiple challenges simultaneously. She had to manage the expectations of thousands of fans who had paid significant money and invested enormous emotional energy in supporting her. She had to overcome the statistical reality that she had struggled against Czech players in general, and Valentova specifically in the past. She had to channel the incredible energy in the stadium without letting it overwhelm her tactical discipline. And she had to do all of this while dealing with the physical reality of playing tennis at a high level in oppressive Middle Eastern heat. What made the difference was the mental evolution Eala has undergone over the past 2 years. Earlier in her career, she might have crumbled under that weight of expectation. She might have tried too hard to please the crowd, gone for winners she shouldn't have attempted, and beaten herself through unforced errors. Instead, she demonstrated remarkable maturity and tactical awareness, using the defensive skills and court coverage she developed at the Rafael Nadal Academy to stay in points she had no business winning. The match featured extended baseline rallies, where Eala used her heavy topspin forehand, that lefty hook she perfected on Spanish clay courts, to push Valentova behind the baseline and neutralize the Czech player's power advantage. The courts in Doha are medium-speed hard courts with enough grit to take spin well, which favored Eala's game. Her balls jumped up high off the court, making it difficult for taller, flatter hitters like Valentova to establish comfortable rhythm and timing. There was one particular point in the second set that instantly went viral on social media and perfectly encapsulated what makes Eala special. She was pulled wide to her backhand side, almost into the doubles alley, scrambling desperately to even reach a ball that seemed certain to be a winner for Valentova. She sprinted, slid on the hard court with her momentum carrying her toward the sideline, and somehow managed to flick a passing shot down the line that landed perfectly in the corner. The roar that followed was absolutely deafening. Videos of the moment captured the entire stadium erupting as one, the noise levels so extreme that people joked it registered on local seismographs. That's not actually hyperbole for comedic effect. The sustained noise from 7,000 people screaming simultaneously genuinely creates measurable vibrations. The sound was suffocating for Valentova and euphoric for Eala, a perfect demonstration of home court advantage in what was technically a neutral venue. After securing the victory, Eala did something that further cemented her connection with the Filipino community. She took the microphone for the post-match on-court interview and spoke primarily in Tagalog, the language of the Philippines, rather than defaulting to English as most international athletes do. The stadium, which had already been loud, somehow found another gear. The ovation was extended, emotional, and genuine. In her remarks, Eala specifically acknowledged the sacrifices made by overseas Filipino workers, many of whom are employed in difficult jobs far from home, sending money back to support families they rarely see. She thanked them for spending their hard-earned wages on tickets to support her. She told them they made her feel at home despite being thousands of miles from the Philippines. That emotional connection, that recognition and validation of their experiences and their support, created a bond that transcends normal athlete-fan relationships. This is what Muhammad Ali had. This is what Manny Pacquiao had. This is what very few athletes ever achieve. The ability to represent something bigger than themselves, to become a symbol for an entire community, to make people feel seen and valued simply through their success and acknowledgement. Alex Eala has achieved this at 20 years old, and it's a form of star power that cannot be manufactured through marketing campaigns or media training. Meanwhile, back in their hotel rooms or practice courts, the Grand Slam champions who came to Doha expecting to be the main attractions were forced to confront an uncomfortable new reality. The tournament they were supposed to dominate, at least from a marketing and attention perspective, had been completely taken over by a player who by traditional metrics shouldn't even be in the conversation. The promotional energy, the media coverage, the buzz on social media, all of it centered around Alex Eala. For someone like Aryna Sabalenka, this has to create complicated emotions. She's not a villain in this story. She's an incredibly talented, hard-working athlete who has earned every bit of her success through dedication and excellence. She deserves to be recognized as one of the best players in the world. But recognition and star power are different things, and in Qatar, she learned that lesson in the most direct way possible. The images and videos that circulated globally told the story more powerfully than any article or analysis could. Split-screen comparisons showing the sold-out Eala session, next to half-empty stadiums for matches featuring top 10 players, became unavoidable content across tennis media. The visual contrast was damning for the established stars and validating for those who had been arguing that the WTA needed to completely rethink how it identifies and promotes its marketable athletes. This situation exposes fundamental problems with how tennis, and perhaps professional sports more broadly, thinks about star power and marketing. The traditional approach has been to use objective metrics like ranking, Grand Slam titles, and career accomplishments to determine who gets featured in promotional materials, who gets scheduled in primetime sessions, who gets the biggest endorsement deals and appearance fees. The logic is straightforward. The best players are the most marketable players, so put your promotional resources behind proven champions. But Alex Eala just proved that logic is incomplete at best and potentially completely wrong. She might be ranked lower than Sabalenka. She might have won fewer titles. She might have less impressive career accomplishments. But in Qatar, and likely in any location with a significant Filipino population, she's infinitely more valuable from a pure business perspective. She sells tickets, she creates atmosphere, she generates media coverage, she drives engagement on social media. She does all the things tournament directors actually care about when they're calculating return on investment. This forces an uncomfortable question that the tennis establishment would probably prefer not to address. If accomplishment and marketability are different things, and if tournaments are businesses that need to sell tickets and attract sponsors, shouldn't marketing decisions be based on who actually draws crowds rather than who has the most impressive trophy case? The economic implications are significant and will likely influence tournament scheduling decisions going forward. Tournament directors around the world watched what happened in Doha and are now looking at their own demographics, their own potential audience bases, and reconsidering their assumptions about which players should get featured sessions. If there's a significant Indian population in a city, should they be scheduling matches involving Indian players more prominently, even if those players aren't top ranked? If there's a large Chinese community, should Chinese players get better court assignments? This represents a potentially seismic shift in how tennis tournaments operate. For decades, the sport has functioned on the assumption that the draw is what it is, that scheduling is determined primarily by ranking and broadcast considerations, and that players earn better slots through better results. But what if passionate, engaged demographic communities represent untapped revenue sources that have been ignored because those communities' champions weren't ranked high enough to matter under traditional protocols? Alex Eala is the catalyst for tennis reconsidering these assumptions. If she continues on her current trajectory, if she keeps selling out stadiums wherever significant Filipino populations exist, if she keeps generating the kind of atmosphere and media attention that tournaments crave, we could see fundamental changes in how the sport thinks about scheduling, marketing, and player promotion. The broader implications extend beyond just tennis. What happened in Doha is a case study in the power of representation and demographic support in professional sports. For years, leagues and tournaments have pursued strategies focused on growing the game in new markets, usually through grassroots development programs, exhibition events, and partnerships with local organizations. Those efforts have had mixed results at best, but Alex Eala didn't require any of that infrastructure or investment. She simply emerged as a talented player from the Philippines and instantly, automatically, organically, she had access to a global network of passionate supporters who were just waiting for someone to rally behind. The Filipino diaspora represents a built-in, pre-existing, highly engaged fan base that requires zero development because it already exists. It just needed a champion.